Alright guys, the topic for today's video is going to be looking at pressing and rowing exercises and why you would change your hand position or your elbow position to get a certain training effect. So there's a couple of reasons why you would manipulate the hand and elbow, but usually it's because you're trying to either increase or decrease the tension on a particular part of the range of motion. Or you're trying to emphasize a particular aspect of the muscle. So let's start by looking at just something simple like a bench press. So with just a basic dumbbell press, you'll have a few different hand positions or elbow positions that you can use. And basically the easiest way to think about the difference between your positions, and this applies to stuff like rows too, is that the more in line your elbow is with a particular aspect of the muscle, the more that portion of the muscle is going to get emphasized. You can never really isolate upper chest versus lower chest, or upper back versus lats, or lower lats. Like, you can't isolate it, but you can emphasize it. So for example, let's say I'm doing just a bench press. And I'm going to do just a elbows out press. Okay, as I come down, now if you look at where my elbow lines up relative to a particular portion of my chest, it's about the midpoint. Okay, so just a classic elbows kind of out at about a 45-degree angle bench press is going to emphasize just kind of the middle portion. Okay, so it's going to spread the balance reasonably well. Okay. If I were to alter my elbow position so that now my elbows are coming in a bit tighter at the bottom, we look at where that line of stress as I travel over to my elbow, and now it's coming down a bit more toward my sternum. Okay, so provided I keep my elbows in roughly the same spot, I'm going to place a little bit more emphasis kind of on the lower aspect of the chest, similar to what you might get if you were doing parallel bar dips. Okay, if you look here, my body position is actually pretty similar to if I was up on a set of parallel bars here. Okay, and dips tend to be recognized as more of a lower chest emphasis exercise. So just by alternating the position of my elbow, I can emphasize a particular aspect. Again, you can't isolate it, but you can put more focus on it. Now with presses, you do have to be careful, because the farther away from your body your elbow gets on a press, the more potential there is for stress on the shoulder joint. So an extreme example of this would be what's called the guillotine press, which is actually a really good chest builder for the upper chest, but you have to be very careful with your weight selection because it can add extra strain to the shoulder joint, and it may not be a great option for somebody with some pre-existing issues. So a guillotine press, whether it's done with a straight bar or with dumbbells, when I'm here, I'm actually going to try to bring my elbows almost in line with my throat. Okay, which you can see right now. So if here's my weight, I really can't actually get the bar to come down and make contact because my elbows are so far out and the range of motion is so broad on the way down that this is my full stretch. And again, if you look, my elbows are roughly in line with kind of the clavicular portion of the chest. So that's what I'm going to get the most emphasis on. The guillotine press is more like an upper chest builder. But again, because I'm so far out, you'll feel it if you go in this position. You got to be very, very careful not to overload it and not to go too low or be too relaxed at the bottom, because you can place that extra strain on the shoulder joint. So that's an easy way to kind of figure out, okay, why would I change from a neutral grip to a classic, elbows out at 45, or even using some of these more extreme positions like a guillotine press? That should help it make a little bit of sense. Now with the rowing exercises, the premise is basically the same. So let's take an exercise like a chest supported row. And we can look at a couple of different positions kind of the same way. So we could start with just a classic, again, just pulling straight back so that the hands are almost at a 45-degree angle and the elbows kind of flare out at about a 45-degree angle. So again, it's going to kind of hit a decent, decent coverage across the middle and upper parts of the back, just by doing just a normal, what feels natural for a lot of people. You can continue to alter the emphasis, for example, by pulling your elbows almost into your hips when you row. If you pull your elbows back this way, as opposed to straight up, okay, I can actually place a stronger contraction on the lower part of my lats. Okay, this is typically what's referred to as an arcing row, where I'm actually trying to draw back toward my hips. Now the key here is that anytime you're rowing, you should be thinking about pulling with your elbow and not with your hands. So you can get it wrong if you think I pull my hands to my hips. Okay, because if you look, I can get my hands to my hips without altering my elbow position. I need to think elbows driven back into my hips to the point where my shoulder blades are then dropping down as opposed to just straight back. So I'll get lower lats, I'll get a little bit of serratus anterior just by changing how I'm pulling on this thing. Okay, so that would be one example. If I go the other direction and I start to fan my elbows out, for example, just a very wide angled row, I'm going to now be hitting a bit higher. So rhomboids in between the shoulders, I'll get some traps, I'll get some posterior delts. Now the nice thing is with your rowing exercises, the wider elbow positions are actually very joint friendly. Because there's no gravity compressing the humerus into the ball and socket, you're not going to have the same issues you would with a press. Because gravity is just pushing it this way, regardless of how your elbow is oriented. So unlike a press, this is actually relatively, pain-free and caution-free in terms of pre-existing injuries and watching out for that. So I can just take the elbows straight out in kind of a wider angled row to emphasize more on my upper back. I could actually even treat this almost like an upright row and take a pair of dumbbells or a straight bar, and actually if I try to draw into my forehead, and the elbows are now getting way above the line of the upper back, it actually is going to turn into a little bit of a lateral head of the shoulder exercise, as well as give me a bit more of a pop in my traps. It basically becomes now just like a chest-supported upright row. So again, we can just manipulate what's getting focused just by where we place the elbows and knowing what is going to emphasize what. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of an idea on how you can change your training with your presses and with your pulls, hopefully to be able to tweak the things that you want to develop a little bit more. Thanks, guys.